Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Hello.
Jay Gunkelman. Boy, you were missed last night. Woo.
I don't know why I was missed. I was in the midst of an interview for an environmental thing, the marshland here and the Delta and all of that. So
I can't believe your advocation. Is that? Did I get it right?
Avocation.
Avocation.
Yeah, vocation and avocation. Avocation, you don't make any money. It's just something you do for fun.
Like a podcast?
Yeah, you know. Like life in modern times.
Yeah.
Work all you want, you won't get paid, you know. Questions from last night. Can neurofeedback help with sleeping with your mouth open instead of nasal breathing? There are other ways to deal with those things than neurofeedback necessarily. And there's a kind of a fad of taping your mouth shut. So,
I brought up the old put the tennis ball in your back of a t-shirt.
Yeah, that's to keep you from being on your back, which is usually the obstructive position. If you look at the sleep studies, they monitor whether you're supine, prone, or laying on your side, and the bulk of the obstructive apneas end up being supine. So laying on your back, and they used to just sew the tennis ball. Now they actually sell you a damn shirt with a damn thing that they have them.
You're like Quasimodo.
Yeah, with a little hump. How does training around the sensory motor strip affect this? Well, again, if you've got apneas, you deal with it with other than just neurofeedback. At a 3-bed sleep lab, we never prescribed neurofeedback for an apnea. And although I have seen people say that they've had subjects who had apneas that cleared, I've yet to see sleep study before, sleep study after, ever. So, claims require verification with data. You can make a claim. That the reason that we actually created the standards for when you can make a claim is that we were hearing people make claims that they shouldn't have been making. Claims with no data. So.
A lot of moo came up. Somebody's wife never ever has been able to smell anything, so we were wondering if neurofeedback could fix that. Moo waves, spelled MEW. ChatGPT. Definitely a Barry Sturman came up with that, right?
Well, he probably couldn't come after you for that,
Oh, it's a meow wave.
Yeah. Well, he did call them owl eyes and monkey faces because he didn't like the term mew. When he introduced SMR in the first international EEG meeting, Henri Gastaut, the French electroencephalographer from the very beginning, he's kind of like Gibbs in the U.S. or Lennox Gastaut epilepsy. Gastaut is a big figure, and he dismissed SMR as just being mew. So Barry really was kind of beaten up by the term mew. He doesn't like to hear it, and I don't care if you call it mew, owl eyes, monkey face. 2 dots on the head, whatever you call it, as long as you recognize what it means, the mirror neuron system being disconnected, and which is frontal. You see C3, C4 owl eye dots, the mu power, usually a little faster than the background alpha, half a cycle to a cycle typically, rarely slower, but most of the time slightly faster than background alpha at PZ. So, mu, when you see it, means the frontal lobe is not engaged, the mirror neuron. And if you fix the frontal lobe's function, mu goes away. Generally, if you activate the salience network, which engages the central executive network, mu is a disconnect. When you engage the central executive network, mu goes away. So stimulating salience network, which activates central executive, turns off mu. So activating frontally is a way to get rid of mu. You can train it down centrally, but I don't find that to be as effective as fixing the frontal lobe function.
Well, Michael Jordan came up, and I said, who had the best mu of all time? I can't think of anybody but Michael Jordan or Arnold Palmer, or because I mean, you're in the zone. Who had the greatest zones of all time? You know what I mean?
I, how would you quantify somebody as being zony? Of course, there's some people that are out in the ozone, and that's a different zone. So,
Well, here, I'll tell you what,
uh,
when I played ball, I played football. You have butterflies before the game, and then the minute you have that first hit, you're locked in. You can't hear the crowd, and next thing you know, the game's over, and you're sore as hell. Is that moo?
well, mu doesn't necessarily mean that you're in your zone. It may be required to disconnect from the outside
Yeah.
world's chaos to get into your zone, but it doesn't mean you're walking around with no frontal lobe function. Although in sports, usually when you start to think about what you're doing, you mess it up. You have an overlearned fixed action pattern. All you need to do is execute it. You don't need to think about it. If you think about it, you're going to mess it up. Think about your golf swing. Well, you're going to put that thing into the rough if you're lucky.
Yeah.
It'll be a sand trap or a water trap or something if you're not lucky. But if you think about your running stride when you're running, you may end up finding yourself not running. Thinking about your swimming stroke doesn't necessarily make it better. The things that you've overlearned, you need to just let your fixed action patterns execute. Now, there are coaches that need you to change your stroke to make it a more efficient stroke. And in that circumstance, you have to be thinking about it and do an overlearning of a new pattern. But that's different than executing a pattern that you have as a known fixed action pattern. Your running stride, your golf swing, your swimming stroke, your signature. Your signature when you're doing it just on the fly is your signature. If you stop to think about what you're writing or you do it too carefully, the bank is going to look at that and going, I don't know.
I mean, is
Although
that the
they're
same thing, Jay? Like, oh man, I got this pain in my side, and the minute I start thinking about it, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Is that the same?
that's a little bit different.
Different?
Uh,
Okay.
uh, it, you know, intention is frontal when you intend to move, and the Bright shaft's potential electronegative buildup in the premotor area to turn on the motor regulatory circuitry. So that electronegative shift before something happens, it gets you ready for it. That's intention. That's frontal. What about the stuff in the back of that, the sensory areas? When you intend to perceive, when you focus on a sensation and you intend to perceive it, you actually amplify the experience of it, which is in part why what they call the distress network or the suffering network and pain, when that's lit up, you're focusing on the thing that is painful, and it makes it worse. The neurosurgeon I worked with looking for thalamicortical dysrhythmia in chronic pain, the people who had distress network, not just the pain thalamicortical dysrhythmia in the sensory area, but also the distress network, they would, without exception, call for the report early. They were in such distress that they were seeing if they could get the results a little early. They were told to be 5 days, day 3, day 4. They were already pestering for a result. So, but they were in distress, and that motivates you to do all sorts of stupid things. So,
I thought that was alcohol.
well, that does, brings on some stupid things too. So,
Overtraining symptoms. I threw out headache.
headache can be an overtraining symptom very easily. You have an area that you have a migraine headache in, and you need to activate that area gently to open up the blood vessels in the area. But if you overactivate it, then you make the ischemia worse, which is headache. So the treatment has to be done appropriately. If you have ischemia, the slow edge of alpha tracks ischemia, and when you see that, you need to train something slightly faster than the 11-12 range. So usually it's an SMR frequency range, fast alpha in the temporal lobe. It's not SMR in the temporal lobe, but in that frequency range. And that's a neutral positive perfusion, which will help open up the blood vessels. The brain regulates its own blood supply. When you turn an area on, it opens up the blood supply in the area. So activity, electrical activity in the brain precedes the vasodilation and the increased blood flow in the area. So what we're trying to do is turn the area on, but not exceed the ability of an impaired supply line to provide the flow. If you push it to that limit, it opens it up slightly. And over time, you can open up the blood vessel. But if you do it too much, too fast, you create hypoxia because the blood flow can't supply enough to meet the demand. Hypoxia creates edema. Edema creates a worsening of the ischemia. Pressure collapses blood vessel. You can't expand out because you've got a skull and everything holding everything in. Well, for me, I just squirt. I leak more fluid if I have more pressure. So,
They asked, does Jay have any recommendations for training elderly or vascularly compromised clients?
Train gently, consistently, and persistently. Don't overtrain. And their expectation needs to be that the change will be gentle and gradual. And it's also good to be able to track the performance that's been degraded so that you can see objectively kind of how things are returning. So if somebody, for instance, has word finding, verbal fluency, if you have the people around them rank their ability to speak during the day and that sort of thing on an ongoing basis, or the person indicate how many times they had profound difficulty finding words and that sort of thing. So track the behavior so that you can actually see the change. Because if you do something over a 30-day period, it's kind of like making a mark on the wall to see your kid grow up. If you make a mark every single day, all you have is a smear. You got to actually wait a little bit of time till they grow, and then you make another separate mark. And so the changes are going to be slow and steady. You need to have some objective measurements that you can look back on. Which for like sleep, having an Oura Ring or a Fitbit or something that's actually tracking sleep, you can go back and look. Oh, a month ago your sleep scores were 75, and now they're 89 or 95, whatever the high end may be for the individual. And different people can achieve different levels of sleep score kind of inherently. So.
Well, we got stumped on smell, Jay. I know sight's in the back of the head, right? Where does olfactory come in?
Well, your nose. Now you have on the base of the forebrain, you have two long protrusions on the underside of the brain called the olfactory bulbs, and they stick out in the front. I can't quite reach it. I got a model of everything right
You
behind
didn't
me
want to
here, but
get
I
your
can't.
Mr. Homunculus out again, did you?
No,
Okay.
this was a this is actually a structural model
Okay.
of. Let me turn around to get it here.
No problem.
Uh,
Sorry to make you work,
all the
Jay.
way, all the way around over here. So back in the day, the detail men that used to go around, or detail women that used to go around to sell drugs to the doctors, used to give away models. And this is a model, and it's you can see this is a model of the limbic system, and these protrusions in the front here, you can
Yeah.
see they're underneath the brain over top of it, but these are the olfactory bulbs, and there's little tiny hair cells that come up through the cribriform plate, the bony plate underneath it, and they hook into the olfactory bulb. Now, there's a couple of things that can ruin this. If you hit your head really bad, a significant head injury, you can actually tear the little connections. And you've just torn away the ability of your nose to get smell up into the olfactory bulb. Now, the sense of smell and the sense of taste end up in the same spot in the uncus in the temporal lobe, and that that spot ends up having taste, which goes through your brain stem and through your thalamus and then up to the uncus, and your olfactory goes into the olfactory bulb and then right over to the uncus. So the two are there by separate pathways, but if you change the sense of smell, you change the sense of taste. The plug your nose and take a bite of an onion. you know,
COVID.
yeah, yeah. Well, people that lost the sense of smell, which was one of the indications that you might have caught COVID, is that it's in your nasal passage and it's killing off the cells. So you've lost the sense of smell. Some people get the sense of smell back if the damage isn't too terribly awful. But most of the time, if it's traumatic or infectious, a bad virus you can lose it. A bad head injury, you can lose it. Some people are born without the sense of smell. Uh, um, who knows whether it was lost from a trauma of some sort or whether it was just not generated. There are reports of people getting the sense of smell back, um, but it's not necessarily that there's a protocol for return of sense of smell. The depends upon how you lost it and the probability of getting it back. If you lost it from an infection, months later, you may start to get smell back. You may not want to get that kind of smell back because quite often the kinds of smell that you get aren't necessarily the ones you want. So obviously our co-host is
Yeah, long time
and
no here, Sky.
well, he heard something out front. PG&E's been working in the neighborhood,
Yeah, yeah.
um, replacing a gas line through the street and then all the hookups to all the homes.
Tell
And
tell
we
him
haven't lost anything in the neighborhood yet.
don't start any fires out there.
Uh, we we've got a nice cozy spot here. I don't need to necessarily light a fire under it or anything. So
Okay.
uh,
So this person could have got sick when they were young or could have done a face plant and charged
yeah,
something.
yeah, entirely possible. Again, an infection that can actually destroy the cell, the cells that sense it, and transfer it up into the olfactory bulb. It's very seldom actually, damage up in the brain and the olfactory bulb. It's usually just the going through the cribriform plate and ends up being the spot where it's killed off. If the infection in your nasal passage actually made it up through the cribriform plate, you'd end up having a brain infection. So you're lucky if all you lost is a sense of smell. A brain infection can take a lot more from you. You know, the meningitis, the meninges being inflamed. Not a good thing having an infection inside the head. That's what I'm trying to avoid. I have an open pathway for any infection that gets in my sinuses can go straight up through into my brain. So I have to limit my exposure to people.
Well, especially these days. There's so, there's so much fewer good ones out there.
and you can't tell the bad ones for the good ones, or you just go shoot them all,
Let it dead on post. Somebody asks, how can you tell on an EEG if somebody is unattentive?
Well, I would suggest attention and vigilance are related. And vigilance is a model that's been used in Europe for a long time. It's very well developed. They use it during eyes closed, but the same basic principles apply in the eyes open condition. And the model basically goes, if you're wide awake, but your eyes are closed, you have alpha in the back of your head. And as you become less attentive, less vigilant, it moves not just in the back, but it's also up front. If you become even less attentive, it gets bigger in front than it is in the back. And if you become even less attentive, the alpha goes away. That happens when the reticular nucleus of the thalamus isn't providing acetylcholine to the nuclear bodies in the thalamus, so they quit making alpha. So you're making alpha, it anteriorizes, it gets really big up front, and all of a sudden, boom, it quits. Well, when it quits, that's the start of what you would call stage 1 sleep or drowsiness. And the next one is that theta start to happen up front. And then theta gets really big up front. So that's gone from A1 alpha at the back, A2 alpha up front, A3 alpha big up front, B1 alpha drop out, B2 some theta, B3 big theta. The next thing is sleep. Vertex sharp waves and spindles indicating that you fell asleep. So that's the progress from being wide awake, looking at the blackboard, listening to the teacher, focused and attentive and alert. But when you start to sit there with alpha in the front, you're doing a little bit of less attentive, daydreamy, more kind of self-reflection than it is paying attention to the teacher and the blackboard. So they actually have devices that monitor truck driver long haulers' activity to see drowsiness, and they do eye tracking. Some of them actually look at brain activity as well. But if you're drowsy and you start to look really drowsy, it alerts you. And if you have too many drowsy episodes too often, it tells you to get the hell off the road. And, if you're driving like nuclear waste or a tanker full of gasoline, you can't be dozing off at the wheel, you can't be drifting your lane, no. The cars behind you see the tail end of your tanker waving back and forth. They know they shouldn't be trying to pass, So anyway, the vigilance and attention are related. Again, attention is the intention to perceive. And if you've turned off your sensory areas by turning off all of your alpha, you're not attending at all. You're out in the ozone again.
All right. How do we differentiate between fast alpha, slow alpha, beta spindles, and mu-related inattentiveness? That's where it came from.
With the EEG. Uh,
Thanks,
you
Jay.
know, um, first of all, fast alpha, slow alpha depend upon your age because you start out with normally a slow alpha. At age 3, you should start to bump into the 8. You could be 6, 7, 8, but you should see some 8 at age 3. People that have real good recollection of their early childhood at age 3 had good alpha at age 3. If you can't remember shit before age 6, you probably had slower alpha. You know, now there are people that had traumatic childhoods who have childhood memories that are lost because they're suppressed, and you can retrieve those memories sometime during some good therapy, but it's not always pleasant because they're buried for a reason usually. Traumas, especially developmental early life childhood traumas, an awful circumstance, you know. And you might think, well, you know, I came from a good family. There wasn't any overt abuse. Well, abuse isn't the only kind of problems for a developing brain. You need stimulation, face-to-face interaction. You could be ignored as a child and have attachment problems.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.
You can be abandoned as a child and end up with shame and guilt as social emotions. Allan Schore, who's probably written the best work about the foundational problems in developmental trauma, a psychiatrist out of UCLA. He's ancient now. But in the 90s, 96, 97, 98, and there he was writing chapters, long, well done chapters of details of neuroscience and how the interaction between the parent and the baby develops the neurochemistry for primary emotions right frontally, face to face. You know, you make the baby sticks their tongue out, you stuck your tongue out. You know, you're mimicking or mirroring. And so you're playing faces with the baby, and you've seen people do this, you know, the surprise face or the hiding face, you know, but you're playing face to face with the baby, and they actually learn emotions from this experience, and they develop the neurochemistry that actually develop appropriately. If this doesn't happen right, you have the neurochemistry development of pathology, and later life pathology can emerge. Now, at age 1 or 2, you get past just the primary emotion stuff, and you start to actually learn the social emotion, which is not all right frontal. It starts to be left temporal, and you think, what? I always learned all the emotional stuff was over here. What the hell is Jay talking about over here? You know, well, it's a social emotion. Shame and guilt aren't the same as fear and anger and anxiety. You know, those are felt sense of emotion. Shame and guilt are social emotions, and those are learned later, and they're learned left temporally. Read your Allan Schore work, you know, and you learn about these good things. And I'd recommend if you're in the field thinking about trauma, that you read Allan Schore's work. It's foundational stuff. And if you go to a workshop and you're going to hear a lot of people quoting stuff without necessarily quoting them, they won't say Allan Schore says, you know, they'll just say, you know, as though they came up with it. So you have to be aware of the, you know, where things came from historically. You know, you don't have to trace it back to Alexander the Great or something, but you know, try to pinpoint the the person who started to write about the topic early on, and how their thoughts developed.
And then somebody wanted to know your thoughts on doing neurofeedback in a more compressed time frame versus stretching it out. Like
Well,
5 times a week for 8 weeks versus slower
different
stuff.
purpose, different
Okay.
purpose. If you're looking, I'm cheap as shit. I don't want to pay anything more than I have to pay for this damn treatment. So I want to optimize my gain per session. Well, that's different than I'm suffering. I want to get over this really fast. So a friend of mine who unfortunately, after he presented the data, ended up being killed in a car accident before he could get it published. But Larry Van Bloom, and he was a bit of a controversial figure in reactive attachment. He did holding therapy, which was, some people overdid holding therapy and squeezed kids to death, things like that. It's a good idea to establish dominance and whatnot, but it's not. You have to know what you're doing. But his classroom in Utah received every reactive attachment disorder kid from the county, from the school district, because you didn't want a rad kid in your school class. It was like a hand grenade in the middle of the room. They'll blow up, and the whole school day is spent trying to deal with the crazy kid. So they got him out of the school district. And they sent him to Larry. Well, Larry's got a whole room full of all rad kids. So he needs to get them better quick. He's being paid to school them. He's not being paid per session for the neurofeedback at all. But the neurofeedback is part of their schooling. You got to learn how to operate your brain as part of school. So for him, 3 sessions a day was not uncommon. But for rad kids, he was doing 120 plus sessions to get them better. People who learned the technique from him, but had an office model where you would come in 3 times a week. Now, what's the difference? 3 times a day, 3 times a week, a big deal. You run to a certain number of sessions. Haven't you got the same number of sessions? Yeah, but you haven't slept in between them. If you sleep, you take short-term memory and you make it long-term memory. You long-term potentiate the memory. So if I learned X number of things from my neurofeedback session and I don't sleep and I have another session, I haven't really put what I've learned into long-term potentiation yet. So the session efficiency isn't optimized. The people who learned the technique could take a rad kid and in about 40 to 60 sessions have them behaving pretty damn well. And what's the difference between 40, 60, and 120? Well, a lot if you're paying per session, but it took longer 3 times a week than it did 3 times a day. And for Larry in a school setting, they wanted the kid to be less disruptive, quicker. And there wasn't any ethical thing of I'm doing 3 a day and I'm really pocketing the money, there wasn't some, nefarious purpose of doing it to make more money. They were being paid to like a per day rate, like you would at a private school. So although it was a public school paying for it, so it wasn't really private school rates. he was, but he was doing it as a therapist, not as a school teacher trying to just educate. He was trying to get these kids that had rad better. Now, we started doing QEEGs on these kids. Now, who the hell knew what the QEEG and reactive attachment looked like? Well, this is a long time ago now. 2000, so 25 years ago, basically. And there wasn't any evidence of reactive attachment EEGs. First of all, who the hell wants to hook up a reactive attachment kid? This is going to be a difficult hookup, an awful recording, but Larry hooked these kids up and sent recordings in. Now we had been used to ADD, frontal theta, frontal alpha, some beta, but RAD has this right temporal finding, social perceptual finding, and an anterior cingulate finding. 93% of all these kids had those two spots lit up. And we thought at first, there's something wrong with this amp. So he had a Lexicor. And, if you know Lexicor, you can take the top off, and there's a bunch of boards mounted vertically. And these boards are tin, not gold, tin plated inserts. So eventually they get fritzy. So you can pull them out, wipe them off good, stick it back in. Sometimes that fixes the amp channel. So we had them pulling amp boards, swapping amp boards around to see if the problem tracked the amp boards. It wasn't the amp board. We sent him a new set of caps, thinking it's some funky thing in the wiring on the cap, But we did what we could to prove that it was an error, but we couldn't prove it was an error. All we could do is show RAD had T6 or P8 problems, which is social perception. That's part of their problem. They can't perceive social context properly, and they don't behave properly. So anyway, poor Larry, before he could do any writing up of anything, ended up being killed in a car accident.
That's
So,
messed up, Jay.
yeah, imagine a drunk driver in Utah. Pretty much a
Covered
dry
wagon?
state, almost a dry state,
Those covered wagons move pretty quick.
Yeah. So anyway, we've lost a lot of people over the
Yeah.
years, and he was a young one who had a lot of future in front of him. It was a big loss.
Then the next one that everybody shied away from was gamma and training it with neurofeedback.
Why did they stay away from it? Gamma is good. Yeah. Gamma is bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends upon what kind of
Depends.
gamma. It depends exactly. Our sponsor. That if the gamma comes in bursts, and if it's up front, there's 6 bursts of gamma in a second. That's gamma nested in theta. So every time theta goes to the negative half wave, you see a burst of gamma. Every time it drops to electropositive, the gamma goes away. That's nested gamma. That's healthy. But you can find gamma up front in pathology that's gamma on, permanently on. It's just gamma buzzing away. That's a thalamocortical dysrhythmia. When gamma's on permanently, it's pathology. If it's chirping on and off, that's happy, healthy gamma. In the back of the head, gamma's nested in alpha for perception. Gamma's content. It's not state. The waves that we see are state, and the content is the little bursts of gamma that ride on them. And if you look really carefully, your theta wave has 7 bursts of gamma on the peak. That determines your digit span. If you have fewer peaks of gamma on the top of your theta nest, your digit span drops down. You can predict someone's digit span by looking at their EEG. Look at the front, look at the theta and gamma, see how much nested gamma waves you see in the theta wave. And if there's 7, you've got healthy, normal ability to remember numbers, like a phone number. Yeah, 7 digits, unless you have to have an area code as well. So, but we have as you age and things slow, you can't squeeze as many things in, and your ability to produce big voltages in various waveforms tend to fall apart. memory and things like that start to fall apart. So gamma is healthy, normal function when it's happening in chirps, in nested rhythms. It sounds like we're a bunch of bird brains, you know, chirps and nests. My God, what are they doing? Although I did put out an ad for an EG tech, and I got somebody who replied once. He says, I've got lots of experience with incubators."
I just
No,
need bond money.
that's EGG, not EEG. A dyslexic chicken lover. I don't know what he was, but we didn't offer him the job because we don't work with incubators. So,
And then Jay, the last one, which will get you rolling. Somebody asked or said, Jay has mentioned microplastics, LEDs, and phone use. What does he see as the top environmental disruptors of brain health today?
probably disturbed sleep.
Sleep.
None of the above is the answer. You know, microplastics are a problem. If you have atherosclerotic plaque build up and your arteries are narrowed, you don't want flotsam and jetsam floating through. You know, an inner tube floating by catches in the narrows and clogs everything up. Pretty soon you got a beaver dam worth of stuff in your carotid, and you end up with a stroke. So microplastics are a big problem. LED EMF stuff ends up disturbing quality of life, not just quality of sleep, but quality of life. If you're in a circumstance that is a hostile electromagnetic environment, you have a problem. You know, the Edison Electric Institute, which is all of the it's all of the power producing companies in the U.S. as a good old boys club, Edison Electric Institute, and they heard about this Swedish study saying that 3 milligauss was caused a 400% increase in leukemia in kids, and 3 milligauss isn't very much, and they wanted to disprove that. Well, it's fine if you want to disprove it. Set up an experiment. Tell people what your experiment is and execute it. So they did an experiment. They found fluctuating numbers. They didn't really have enough people to make a good prediction on leukemia in kids. But what they did find is that people that had high level exposure, linemen, people who worked in the electric power industry that were walking around inside of you have a switch yard full of things that they got to pull and disconnect one circuit to reconnect another. Now a lot of that's automated, but people that are in high voltage environments end up having a higher incidence of astrocytoma, brain cancer. So they didn't really disprove the link between EMF and cancer. They brought a different kind of cancer and a different kind of exposure to our attention, but their study wasn't structured to actually show well how young kids at low level were exposed. Now, the Swedish people looked at where people lived, and if you lived under a power line where you're getting 150 milligauss or so, maybe as low as 100 if you're a little off to the side, but if you're near a power line, that's kind of what you got. And they looked at people who were farther away, and 3 milligauss is a reasonable amount of exposure, but they showed that more than 3 milligauss was enough to give you a 400% increase. Now, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? Got a 400% increase, 4 times as many. Well, it's super rare. it went from like 6 to 4 times 6, so it isn't like there was, hundreds and hundreds of kids suddenly rushed off to the hospital with leukemia, but there were more than one might hope. Four times as many as would be predicted, basically. So the Swedish study really goes unrefuted. It's the basis of why I pushed for a 3 milligauss standard for California at 3 feet.
You are something.
Oh well, the all the guys sitting behind their dais when they asked for what standard I would propose, because the power companies that were there were saying, well, there is no standard, so that they turned to me and said, well, what standard would you propose? Don't ask me a question like that. So, what are they thinking? They don't know me. So what I said, well, I would suggest if you hold the Gauss meter at testicular height above the buried power line, you shouldn't have more than 3 milligauss. And so that they couldn't put that as a standard testicular height. I mean, people have different levels of leg length, so they put 3 feet. I think they thought they had long legs, I looked at them. There wasn't anybody up there with a 3 foot long inseam, so
I wasn't there.
Anyway.
And then Jay, of course, people are asking about October.
Well, it's a very nice month. I was born on the 12th, which is Indigenous Americans Day or Columbus Day, depending upon which side of the coin you want to look. So it's the most politically incorrect day to be born.
All right.
Well, I know maybe one of the religious holidays could be too. Yeah. Who knows? I don't care. But I can't travel, so and I do like to celebrate making it one more year and pissing off the statisticians who thought I'd be dead a long time ago. But I can't travel, so how can you have a big party? Well, you invite friends from all over the world to come in, and what do? I'm not really I'm a freaking geek. I talk EEG, but talk to me about movies or social things and things like that. Renita's my better 95%. She knows all these things about the movies and the Oscars and who's this and who's that, and I don't recognize any of that stuff. My knowledge base doesn't include any of that. So my party is basically an EEG meeting, 3 days of EEG, and I invite people from around the world to pop in, and they do, and we talk about EEG and have a good time. It's not like we don't know how to party. It's just it's a bunch of geeks partying is all, and but the yacht club is a perfect spot. It's got plenty of room to find the spot that makes it just right for you. You can watch the proceedings from in the bar on the big screen, or you can be in the primary hall, which only seats 80, or you could be internationally just watching it live stream. But from the 8th to the 11th this year, because my birthday's on the 12th, it's a Sunday, and that's a travel day, so we didn't want to keep people stuck. So we celebrate it on the 11th this year, but I'll celebrate anything, anytime. So, give me an excuse to celebrate. I celebrate being alive another day. I'm not a betting man, but that's my daily bet. I bet I make it one more day. So
well, save that date. We'll have more information soon. And if you want more of this fine young gentleman, every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Time, when Jay's available, you can check him out, ask any crazy question. And if you don't ask any questions, that means I have to ask questions. That drives everybody crazy. So you better show up.
it's fun seeing people's level of interest and what they're asking questions about. And of course, you know, parents with their kids, you expect that, but you never know what angle it's going to come in from.
Yeah, what
you know,
market?
It's not like war where you've got a trajectory you expect to be shooting from that direction. You know, you might get a question from over right field, left field, center field. Goodness gracious, the batting people behind you might throw something. You never know.
You're a Mickey Mantle, Jay, so we don't have Mickey Mantle in the lineup.
Roger Maris was from Fargo.
Don't you know?
Yeah,
that's a hell of a story too. People should check him out.
You know Roger.
Yeah. Number one, baby.
Well, you know, when stars get fed up with the followers and the paparazzi and everything, he wasn't the first person to flip off everyone.
No.
You know, so
you can only imagine him today.
He could moon him, you know.
That's Jim McMahon. Jay Gunkelman, another great show, man. Thank you. NeuroNoodle Neurofeedback Podcast. Always loves having some Jay Gunkelman.
Well, what's left of me, at least, you know.
The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.